much more fun than climbing stairs.
How do I do it? We're back with another video. It's fucking Spider-Man.
Today, I'm so excited to talk to you all about SpongeBob SquarePants: The Titans of the Tide, the latest SpongeBob video game, and unironically, one of my most anticipated games of 2025. Before we begin, I do want to give a major shout out to the publisher, THQ Nordic, for hooking me up with a review code. It is very, very much appreciated. This really is a dream come true. If you had told child Jonathan he was going to get a review code for the latest SpongeBob game, he probably would have shat his pants, and maybe even drooled a little. What I'm trying to say is I'm incredibly grateful. But enough about that, let's actually get to the game. So Titans of the Tide is the latest 3D platformer in the SpongeBob series. If you're unfamiliar, SpongeBob's actually had a number of 3D platformers over the last 25 years at this point, with some of them actually being pretty good, with the fan favorite being SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. It was such a fan favorite that the game was actually remade in 2020 by this small studio known as Purple Lamp, and the remake was so successful, THQ Nordic greenlit not one, but actually 2 sequels to it, with this game obviously being the second sequel. And I gotta say, the return of the SpongeBob 3D platformers honestly needs to be studied. And that's because I thought SpongeBob games, let alone good SpongeBob games, were pretty much dead and gone. Outside of shitty mobile games, I figured that's all it would be, but no, SpongeBob has had a total resurgence in the video game scene, and honestly, it's great to see, especially as somebody who grew up playing SpongeBob games, which is probably who THQ Nordic and Purple Lamp are targeting. But anyway, after that little history lesson and intro, let's actually, talk about the video game that I'm supposed to talk about. I know, like 2 minutes in, yeah, I'll finally talk about the game. I know all of you are posing the question, is it worth it? That's what this video is going to answer, and by the end of it, I promise you, you'll have an answer. So this game takes place after BFBB and the Cosmic Shake. There are clear references and mentions to those game stories, but you absolutely do not have to play those in order to play this. This game's story is very much its own entry. You honestly don't need to know a damn thing about SpongeBob to understand this game's story. It's pretty shrimple. It's about Bikini Bottom's 2 most powerful entities, King Neptune and the Flying Dutchman, beefing with each other. Why are they beefing with each other? Well, the Flying Dutchman wanted a Krabby Patty, waited in line hella long, and King Neptune basically cuts him in line. Yeah, there's not much more to it than that. And because of these 2 powerful entities fighting each other, all hell breaks loose in Bikini Bottom, and there are ghostly figures everywhere. And so it's up to SpongeBob and Patrick to find some way to stop them and, of course, save Bikini Bottom. The story is as shrimple as an episode, and honestly, that's all it needs to be. Nobody's coming to this game expecting some deep, engaging narrative of Red Dead Redemption 2 levels. If you came to it expecting that, well, I hate to break it to you, but this one ain't it, chief. Despite the premise and general plot, the game is still incredibly lighthearted, silly, goofy, funny, and rarely takes itself seriously. The jokes are absolutely on point here. They are as SpongeBob as it gets, and I found myself laughing plenty of times. Even when the game is about to start to get serious, usually Patrick will just say something so out of pocket and ridiculous that it always made me crack a smile. I thought the writing and general storytelling was exactly what it needed to be. It felt more like old SpongeBob than new SpongeBob, and if you're somebody who's watched SpongeBob religiously like I have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The jokes aren't super forced and reference plenty of pop culture from the 90s all the way up until modern day. And I will say that even though you can play through this game with absolutely no knowledge of SpongeBob and enjoy it, I think you're going to get a hell of a lot more out of it if you enjoy the source material, if you know the memes, if you know the references, if you know the older episodes in particular. I think you're really going to enjoy the throwbacks and callbacks. I'm sure there will be plenty of people saying this is just nostalgia baiting, this is low-hanging fruit, they should have come up with more original stuff, but at the end of the day, I was happy with it either way, and sometimes I guess that's all that really matters. I knew from the moment that I heard someone screaming chocolate that they were targeting people like me, and I will just leave it at that. I think the story, characters, plot, all of that, pretty good. And when it comes to this game's atmosphere and vibe, it's very much in line with the Cosmic Shake and Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, and I like the general atmosphere that they're going for here. It very much does remind me of the show, specifically newer SpongeBob, which I know isn't everybody's cup of tea, but I think this game looks nice. Speaking of looking nice, let's just talk about the presentation in general. Now, I'm not going to mince words here, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I'm sure plenty of people expect me to glaze every aspect of this game. I'm not going to be glazing the presentation. Look, graphically, I think the game looks fine. It's very clearly a budget license game. I'm not expecting Cyberpunk 2077 or Ghosts of Yotei, and I'm expecting it to look better than really every 3D Pokemon game, which it absolutely does, but yeah, the game just looks alright. It looks pretty much the same as the Cosmic Shake, which just looked alright for 2023. At least the game is a good aesthetic and is colorful. The characters and general animations I think are fine enough, maybe a little stiff at times, but get the job done nonetheless. The environments, while they look pretty flat for the most part, they also get the job done, but you know what doesn't get the job done? This frame rate. Unfortunately, the game runs on everyone's favorite game engine, say it with me now, Unreal Engine 5, and you know what Unreal Engine 5 usually brings with it? Stuttering and frame rate issues. You know what this game has? Stuttering and frame rate issues. Yeah, even the SpongeBob game has some serious frame rate issues. This game was giving me a lot of trouble at times when it comes to the frame rate. We're talking almost single digits here. I don't know what the hell was going on, but I absolutely should not have been getting any issues here. I have a 4070 Ti Super, which is more than enough for this game, but when things started to get pretty hectic, especially towards the end of the game, the frame rate really started to dip and there actually was a bit of stuttering. Obviously, I was playing the game pre-release. There very well could be a day one patch that fixes all of this, and with me playing on PC, it very much could have been just a me issue, but we're talking about my experience here, and in my experience, I did have some frame rate problems. It's not a deal breaker, it didn't ruin my entire experience, but I was just kind of like, what the hell? Even the SpongeBob game's not safe, and it was rather disruptive. It was kind of disappointing. I hope all of this gets ironed out and nobody experiences the frame rate issues that I did. At least when it comes to the sound, I think things were pretty great. All of the voice acting is super on point. It's very much the characters of the show, and the music was surprisingly good here. SpongeBob games usually have pretty good music. This was no exception. But now let's move on to the core gameplay. Yeah, I know, like 7 minutes in, we're finally going to talk gameplay here. So the game is a 3D platformer. It very much plays incredibly similar to Battle for Bikini Bottom and the Cosmic Shake. If you've played either of those games, you'll know exactly how this game feels, controls, and handles. It's virtually identical to the two prior games, and I thought those games actually felt pretty nice for the most part, so naturally I think this game also feels nice. The controls are really smooth and tight. It always felt like I had total control over my character, and it was incredibly responsive. I got nothing but good things to say about the feel, physics, handling, etc. So what's new and different in this 3D SpongeBob platformer from the last two? Well, the first and probably biggest thing worth bringing up is that you can switch between SpongeBob and Patrick on the fly at a press of a button. It's incredibly smooth and seamless, and you'll constantly be switching between the two characters in order to get through these levels. Like all the other 3D SpongeBob games, each character has a totally unique moveset that will be utilized to the fullest in order to solve the game's puzzles and just generally progress through these levels. And how you progress through these levels is a bit different from the other games. Okay, actually it's not all that different at all, but there are some minor changes here. There's a general hub area that you can freely explore, but then there's the game's main levels. There's around 5 of these in the game, and each one of them takes about an hour to go through, and they're rather linear for the most part. Most of the time, your goal is really to just go from point A to B. Occasionally, you can go off the beaten path, and there's some secrets hidden throughout, but it's a pretty straightforward adventure here. There'll be plenty of platforming, you'll be solving some rather basic puzzles, and you'll be collecting things. Like the other 3D SpongeBob games, there's a currency to collect, which you get for smashing things and defeating enemies. There's a few other collectibles hidden throughout these levels, like these jellyfish, and this is part of one of the game's many side quests. Yes, this SpongeBob game actually does feature side quests. While you can just beeline the main adventure and go from point A to B in all of these levels and just play through the game as that, there's actually a number of side characters that do give you optional missions here. And it's not like just one side mission per level. There's actually several per level, and these aren't terrible. At first I was ready to be like, okay, these are about to be hella cookie cutter, generic copy-paste side quests. No, they're actually pretty decent. For the most part, it usually is just go find something and bring it back or go collect so much of something. But hey, at least there's usually pretty decent context to it, and they usually reference older SpongeBob, which is probably why I enjoyed these side quests. If you're somebody who doesn't get all the references and memes, you're probably gonna think these are pretty lame. But not me, I was popping off. When Squilliam shows up and he gives me a side quest, you already know I'm gonna be all over that shit. But that's the general format of the game. You're dropped into these linear levels, you're doing plenty of jumping, kicking, throwing, and flinging your way through them. Some enemies will show up, but the combat is super simple here, even if you have a dodge roll. Yes, even the SpongeBob game wants to be like Dark Souls and has a dodge roll button, but trust me, the combat is not challenging whatsoever. It's really as basic as it's always been. You just kind of hit the enemies over and over until they die. Unless you're Patrick, then you can just throw them all over the place. There are even bosses in this game, and these bosses are decent enough. They're fun little spectacles, and thankfully they don't go on for too long, but I'm not going to act like these are amazing or even the best bosses in a SpongeBob game. At this point, nothing's really going to beat Battle for Bikini Bottom. And I wouldn't say that they're the most memorable either. Something that I think is actually pretty memorable is this game's general level design. The level design is actually pretty good here. They really do utilize SpongeBob and Patrick's movesets. Their movesets are really different, and the game does a good job of constantly mixing things up. You can't just stay as SpongeBob for like 5 minutes. No, you're going to have to switch to Patrick and vice versa. The game sometimes has you switching constantly on the fly. And while I'm not going to say that the game ever gets particularly challenging, I certainly found it engaging. I could certainly see smaller children having some issues with these levels though, and the constant switching, but you know, as somebody who has a crippling addiction to video games, I didn't find it particularly challenging, and I actually found it a welcome change of pace and a pretty good time. I thoroughly enjoyed my time going through these levels. I wouldn't say that there's a bad level in here. They're all memorable, different from each other, and there's plenty of variety. Yeah, most of the time you are just jumping all over the place, but at least you're doing different things while you're jumping. And hey, when you switch between characters, the music actually changes up quite a bit, and I think that's pretty cool. I also would like to say that I think the pacing is pretty strong throughout. If you just do the main story, you could probably beat this game in around 5, maybe 6 hours, which is a little short, even for a SpongeBob game, but if you do even some of the side quests, you're looking at like a 7 to 8 hour experience, and that's what I would recommend. And you might be going, really, 7 to 8 hours, that's it? Well, you gotta remember, this game isn't $50, this game isn't $60 or $70 or $80, it is $40. And at that, I think the game is pretty reasonably priced. This isn't Little Nightmares 3 where it's like 3 or 4 hours long at $40. No, you're getting at least double that. And there's plenty of optional content and reasons to go back. With all of the currency you get, you can actually unlock all of these fun outfits that are very much throwbacks to older SpongeBob. The game certainly does have its less than stellar moments. From time to time there was a bit of jank and it felt a little unpolished in certain areas, but I didn't find it too disruptive for the most part. Some side missions are, well, they're just better than others, straight up, and I could see some people not really caring for the game's earlier levels. It certainly gets a lot more exciting towards the end when you have your complete moveset and the game is utilizing it to the fullest, but I liked how things were built up towards it. Maybe that's just me. The last thing that I'll bring up is, with the game's length, it never got stale or repetitive or started to get old. Like, it genuinely stayed fresh throughout, which is really appreciated, especially in today's day and age where some games just go on forever and ever and ever. Not this. It ends before it gets old, and I like that. Is it as good or memorable as Battle for Bikini Bottom? No, it's not. But I still found it to be pretty enjoyable and arguably the best licensed game I've played all year, and there's been some good licensed games. And so let's wrap things up. To answer the question at the beginning of the video, is it worth it? Well, it depends. If you're somebody that likes 3D platformers, I think this one's worth it. If you're somebody that likes SpongeBob at all, oh, this is absolutely worth it. And if you think $40 is too much for a game like this, just wait a little bit. These games always go on sale. SpongeBob games usually go dirt cheap pretty fast. So 6 months from now, you'll probably be able to get this game for $15. And if that's too much for you still, well, just wait even longer. But at the end of all of this, I absolutely do recommend the game. I think it is totally tubular, and I'm glad that it's another good SpongeBob game. We can never have too many good SpongeBob games. And now you probably are going, well, how does it stack up to the other 3D SpongeBob games? Well, find out soon. We're going to be doing another ranking video of those games, and I'll see you there. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. If you made it to this part of the video, thank you so much. I love you, and bye-bye.